When God calls you his chosen, he also entrusts you with truths that are not for public consumption. There is a sacred weight to silence that many underestimate. We live in a culture that thrives on oversharing, where people feel compelled to announce every thought, every plan, every feeling, as if the value of their life is measured by how much of it can be displayed. But the truth is, not everything was meant to be revealed. Silence, when anchored in divine purpose, becomes a shield that guards the very power God has placed inside of you. Think about it. Words are never neutral. They either build or they expose. The moment you put your private spiritual treasures into the hands of people who are unprepared to honor them, you invite dilution. Sacred truths lose their edge when they are tossed carelessly into the noise of casual conversation. What was once a holy encounter can quickly become just another story in someone else's gossip. That is why God calls us to discernment. Silence is not about cowardice. It is about stewardship. It is knowing that certain revelations are too precious to be thrown before those who cannot recognize their worth. Psychologically, silence also strengthens resolve. When you keep something unspoken, it grows deeper roots in you. It becomes less about external validation and more about internal transformation. Philosophically, this is the paradox of secrecy. What is hidden often carries more power than what is revealed. The unseen roots of a tree are what sustain its height. The private prayers of a believer are what empower their public witness. To break that silence prematurely is to weaken the very foundation of what God is trying to build in your life. So do not mistake silence for emptiness. It is not absence. It is presence in its most guarded form. It is the vessel in which divine assignments mature until their appointed time. When God chooses you, he expects you to protect what he whispers in the stillness. Not every word spoken to you in prayer needs to be broadcasted. Not every dream given in the night needs to be explained. The true power of being chosen is not in how loudly you can speak, but in how faithfully you can keep. Remember this, silence is not the absence of words, it is the presence of wisdom. When God allows you to encounter him in ways that others may never experience, that is not something to parade around as though it were a trophy. Divine encounters are deeply personal. They are tailor-made for your soul, your walk, your calling. And because of that, not everyone will be able to understand them. Some will dismiss them as imagination. Others will envy them. And some may even distort them to weaken your confidence. That is why it is dangerous to take what God whispered in your spirit and place it on the open stage of casual conversation. What is sacred loses its clarity when it is handled by those who cannot see through the lens of faith. Revelations and visions are not for validation, they are for direction. God doesn't show you something so you can convince others of how spiritual you are. He shows you because he wants to guide you. If you share prematurely, you risk inviting voices of doubt and discouragement that cloud the purity of what God revealed. The psychological truth is this. People often fear or criticize what they cannot comprehend. The philosophical reality is even deeper. Truth revealed to the wrong audience ceases to function as truth. It becomes argument, debate, or mockery. And when that happens, the weight of your encounter can be diminished in your own heart. There is also a spiritual principle at work here. The enemy cannot attack what he does not know. When you expose your visions without discernment, you are essentially opening the gates for opposition to assemble. Joseph's dreams remind us of this. What God showed him was real and ordained, but by sharing too soon with brothers who were not mature enough to handle it, he unleashed hostility that nearly cost him his life. Yet even in that, God's plan prevailed. Still, the lesson remains clear. What God gives you in private must be guarded until he says it is time for it to be revealed in public. So guard your encounters. Let them strengthen you in secret before they shine in the open. The mark of maturity is not in how quickly you share what God has given you, but in how patiently you carry it until it blossoms in its appointed season. Remember this, divine encounters are not proof to display. They are instructions to obey. Every chosen one will face battles that no one else sees. The struggles you endure in silence. The temptations you resist when no one is watching. The nights of wrestling with doubt and fear. Those are not meant to be public exhibitions. Too often, people feel compelled to make their pain a performance, thinking that vulnerability is measured by how much of their suffering they reveal. But there is a difference between sharing testimony and exposing wounds prematurely. Testimony comes after healing. Exposure comes while the wound is still open. And when you open it too soon, you risk letting others pour salt instead of balm. The truth is, not everyone around you wants to see you overcome. Some may secretly hope your struggle consumes you because your rise threatens their comfort. Others may sympathize in words, but quietly judge in thought. By revealing every detail of your private battles, you hand people the very weapons they may later use against you. That's why God often hides his chosen ones in seasons of struggle. Not because he wants them to be ashamed, but because he is teaching them how to find strength in him rather than in human validation. From a psychological perspective, silence during struggle preserves your mental fortitude. The more you rehearse your pain in front of others, the more you reinforce it in your own mind. What you feed with words grows stronger. But when you hold it before God in prayer, instead of parading it before people, you diminish its grip and allow your faith to grow deeper roots. Philosophically, it is the unseen battles that shape the greatest warriors. A soldier is not defined by the battles he announces, but by the victories he carries quietly until the war is over. Your private struggles are classrooms where God trains you in resilience, endurance, and dependence on him. They are not spectacles for others to dissect. When the time is right, your scars will speak louder than your explanations because survival is a testimony all by itself. So carry your struggles wisely. Don't waste your strength trying to prove your pain to people who cannot heal it. Remember this, your greatest growth often happens in the shadows, and the world doesn't need to see the fight to honor the victory. One of the greatest mistakes the chosen often make is announcing the future before it arrives. Dreams and plans placed in your spirit by God are not always meant to be shared with everyone. There is a reason Scripture tells us to guard our hearts, because the heart is where God plants seeds of destiny. If those seeds are exposed too soon, they can be trampled by the envy, doubt, or misunderstanding of others. Some people will not celebrate your vision. They will quietly resent it. Others will not believe in your calling. They will try to convince you that what you heard from God was only your imagination. And in the process, what was meant to inspire your faith becomes a battleground of discouragement. Look at the story of Joseph. God gave him dreams of leadership and influence, but instead of treasuring them in silence, he rushed to reveal them. His brothers, unable to bear the thought of his rise, became his greatest opposition. What God showed was true, but Joseph's premature revelation triggered a storm of hostility that drove him into the pit. Now God still used the pit to shape him, but the lesson is clear. Timing matters. Destiny requires discretion. Psychologically, this is easy to understand. People project their limitations onto others. If they don't believe they could ever achieve something, they will tell you that you can't either. By revealing your plans too early, you allow the doubts of others to shape your confidence. Philosophically, destiny is like a masterpiece in progress. You don't unveil a half-finished painting to critics who only see flaws. You let the brushstrokes continue in silence until the picture speaks for itself. When God gives you a dream, it's not for debate, it's for development. Some visions need the soil of secrecy before they can grow. Silence in the early stages protects you from unnecessary battles, allowing your energy to be spent building rather than defending. The right time will come when your fruit testifies louder than your words ever could. So hold your dreams close. Let your actions reveal what your mouth does not need to announce. Remember this. The future God has promised does not need your publicity. It needs your patience. Real strength doesn't always look like what the world expects. We live in a culture where people measure strength by how much you can display, how loudly you can speak, how much you can flex, how many people can see your discipline and applaud it. But true spiritual strength isn't built for display, it's built for endurance. The most powerful aspects of your walk with God are often the things no one ever sees. The hours spent in prayer when everyone else is asleep, the quiet acts of obedience when no one is watching, the consistent sacrifices that go unnoticed by the crowd. That hidden strength is what sustains the chosen, not the applause of people. When you begin revealing too much about your inner life, how long you fast, how deep you pray, how much you sacrifice, you risk turning something sacred into a performance. Jesus warned us of this, reminding us that the Pharisees loved to display their devotion so others would think highly of them. But that kind of strength is superficial. It looks impressive on the outside, but has no substance when the storms come. The chosen know that the fortress of their faith must be protected from exposure. Its power comes from secrecy. Psychologically, the strength you parade often becomes the strength you depend on, which means when applause stops, your motivation weakens. But the strength you keep hidden is rooted in conviction, not validation. Philosophically, this speaks to the paradox of authenticity. The more you reveal, the more you risk corruption. The more you conceal, the purer it remains. Hidden discipline has a way of shaping the soul that public recognition can never touch. Think of a tree again. Its power doesn't come from the branches that stretch outward. It comes from the roots buried deep in the ground where no one can see. In the same way, your unseen strength is what anchors you when trials come. People don't need to know how much you pray. They just need to see the fruit of a life transformed by prayer. So protect the depth of your strength. Don't trade eternal substance for temporary applause. Remember this, true power is not in what you show the world, but in what you allow God to build in the secret places of your life. One of the clearest marks of being chosen is not just in what you know, but in when you know to speak and when you know to stay silent. Discernment is not a natural talent. It's a spiritual discipline. It requires sensitivity to the Spirit of God, the ability to read the moment, and the humility to realize that not every truth is meant for every ear. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is hold your tongue until God Himself decides the time is right. The problem many face is that they confuse honesty with full disclosure. They think that being genuine means telling everyone everything. But that is not wisdom. That is naivety. The wise know that truth must be delivered in season, and sometimes silence is the very strategy God uses to protect what He is doing in you. The enemy thrives on information. When you speak without discernment, you hand him intelligence he would not otherwise have access to. But when you practice discernment, you force him to fight blind. Psychologically, discernment protects your peace. It keeps you from wasting energy on people who are not ready or willing to hear what you have to say. It saves you from arguments that lead nowhere and from confessions that become burdens you never intended to create. Philosophically, discernment reflects maturity. It is the recognition that words are not merely sounds, they are seeds. And if you scatter them carelessly, they may land in soil that will only choke them out. The chosen of God understand that silence is not absence, it is strategy. There are times when God will have you conceal a truth, not to deny it, but to preserve it. And when the right moment arrives, He Himself will orchestrate the circumstances where what was hidden will come to light in undeniable power. That is the rhythm of divine wisdom. Secrecy in the sowing, revelation in the harvest. So learn to pause, to wait. Don't rush to reveal what God has entrusted to you. Remember this, discernment is the difference between protecting your destiny and sabotaging it. The chosen don't just know what to say, they know when to say it.